Hi, welcome, enjoy the content. Subscribe and turn on notifications. The life that David and Elena had built together was, by all appearances, a masterpiece. It was like a gilded vase displayed in a museum, flawless from a distance, admired by all, and seemingly priceless. Their 10-year marriage was a tapestry woven with threads of shared ambitions, successful careers, and a beautifully curated apartment that overlooked the city's sparkling skyline. They were the couple others pointed to, the ones who had it all figured out. The decision to start a family felt like the final, perfect brushstroke on their canvas, a natural progression in their story of impeccable love. Elena, in the weeks leading up to the weekend, had been radiant. A new, soft light seemed to emanate from her. She started leaving parenting books on the coffee table, their dog-eared pages a testament to her fervent research. She would occasionally pause in the doorway of their second bedroom, the one they had always designated as a future office or nursery. Her head tilted, a secret smile playing on her lips as she envisioned its transformation. She was preparing the nest, and David watched her with a heart so full he thought it might burst. The plan was unveiled over a breakfast of artisan coffee and fresh pastries, the morning sun streaming into their minimalist kitchen. "Darling," Elena began, her voice a melody of excitement and careful planning. "I've had the most wonderful idea. This weekend, while I'm away, would be the perfect time for you to paint the nursery." She reached across the table, her manicured fingers covering his. "This way, all the fumes will have completely dissipated by the time, well, when I might be more sensitive." Her eyes, the color of warm honey, locked with his, conveying a future of shared dreams and tiny waiting booties. David's enthusiasm was immediate and boundless. "Elena, that's brilliant!" he exclaimed, his mind already racing with color palettes. Soft seafoam green, a gentle whisper of gray, perhaps an accent wall with a starry night mural. He saw himself in that room, brush in hand, building the very walls that would shelter their child. It felt like the first tangible step toward the family they had always wanted, a sacred project that was his to undertake. The conversation then seamlessly pivoted, as if following a pre-written script. "And since you'll be so busy creating," Elena added, her tone light and casual, "it's the ideal weekend for my little getaway with Sophia. She's booked us into that new wellness retreat in the mountains. Just 2 days of pure relaxation. I really need this, David. To clear my head before everything." It was logical. It was reasonable. It was, he thought, exactly what she deserved. The following day, consumed by a wave of loving anticipation, David found himself outside an exclusive jeweler's. He had decided to commission a gift, a delicate silver necklace with a small, abstract bird in flight, symbolizing the new life they were hoping for. It was to be a surprise for her return, a token to commemorate this pivotal weekend. As he stood at the counter, finalizing the details, his eyes absently drifted to the street outside. And there, in the cozy cafe directly across the road, he saw her. Elena was seated at a small table, but she was not with Sophia. Opposite her was a man David had never seen before. He was handsome, dressed in a sharp, casual blazer, and he was leaning forward, hanging on her every word. But it was Elena who captivated and horrified David. She was laughing, a free, throaty laugh he hadn't heard in years. She reached out and touched the man's arm, a gesture of easy, intimate familiarity. The way her head tilted, the sparkle in her eyes, it was a language of intimacy he understood instantly, a language that was not meant for him. A cold, sharp clarity pierced through him. The wellness retreat, the perfect timing, the concern about paint fumes. The pieces of their perfect life clattered to the ground, revealing the cracked, fragile pottery beneath the gilded surface. He left the jeweler without the necklace, the vision of the nursery melting into a meaningless blur. That evening, he came home early, his footsteps silent on the polished concrete floor. He heard her before he saw her, her voice a muffled, melodic murmur from their bedroom. The door was slightly ajar. "Don't worry, everything is set. David is completely convinced I'm with Sophia," she was saying, a smile evident in her voice. "He's probably buying eco-friendly paint right now. Yes, your business trip couldn't have been better timed. 2 whole days, just us." The name she uttered next, Mark, landed like a physical blow. David stood in the shadowed hallway, the man who had been planning a future now a ghost in his own home. The pristine, silent apartment seemed to press in on him, every sleek surface a mockery of the beautiful, intricate lie he had called his life. The foundation of their decade together had not just cracked, it had vaporized, leaving him standing over an abyss. The masterpiece was shattered, and all that remained was the truth, sharp and merciless, waiting to be faced. The night was long, a vast and silent expanse where the world outside their apartment ceased to exist. In the wake of the earthquake, a strange, frigid calm had descended upon David. The initial searing pain of betrayal had not vanished, but it had been encased in a shell of pure, unyielding resolve. He did not rage. He did not weep. He sat in the darkness of the living room, the city's lights twinkling far below like a distant, indifferent galaxy, and he began to plan. The loving husband was gone, receding into a memory. In his place emerged a different man, a strategist, an architect of his own survival, methodically dismantling the ruins of a life he now knew had been an elaborate facade. By the first light of dawn, his course was set. He would not grant her the drama of a tearful confrontation. He would not give her the opportunity to spin new lies, to offer hollow apologies that would only be another form of manipulation. His retaliation would be silent, precise, and irrevocable. It would be an execution, not a battle. When Elena descended the stairs that morning, she was a vision of curated excitement. She wore the outfit he had always complimented, her suitcase, purchased for their never-taken honeymoon in Italy, waiting by the door. "All set," she announced, her voice bright with the thrill of her secret. David approached her, his movements deliberate and calm. He held out a slim, elegant envelope. "A small surprise for your trip," he said, his voice a neutral, even tone that made her blink in surprise. Her hands, adorned with the wedding ring he had placed there a decade ago, opened the envelope. Inside were 2 first-class train tickets to a remote, luxurious spa resort, a place she had circled in a travel magazine months ago, sighing about how one day they should go. "For you and Sophia," David clarified, his gaze steady and impenetrable. "Enjoy the relaxation you deserve." The confusion in her eyes was brief, quickly masked by a forced, fluttering laugh. "Darling, this is so extravagant. Thank you." She leaned in to kiss his cheek, but he turned slightly, the kiss landing awkwardly near his ear. A flicker of unease crossed her face, but she dismissed it, attributing his stiffness to preemptive loneliness. "I'll call you tonight," she promised, her voice a little too bright, before wheeling her suitcase out the door, the sound of its wheels a final, fading echo of her deceit. The moment the elevator doors slid shut, the apartment shifted. The air itself seemed to still, as if holding its breath. David did not pause. He changed into old, comfortable clothes, the uniform of a man with a grim but necessary task. His first stop was not a hardware store, but a specialized security firm. He returned with boxes containing a state-of-the-art system, a digital smart lock with a keypad and fingerprint scanner, and a discreet high-resolution camera for the peephole. With the focused intensity of a surgeon, he set to work. The whir of the electric screwdriver as he removed the old, familiar lock was the sound of severing a tie. When he installed the new, sleek, metallic lock, it was with the finality of a judge passing a sentence. "You are no longer welcome here." Next, he moved to the bedroom. He opened her walk-in closet, a space that once smelled of her perfume, and now felt like a museum exhibit of a stranger's life. He worked with a dispassionate efficiency that was more devastating than any outburst of anger. He did not crumple her silk dresses or throw her expensive shoes. He treated each item as evidence to be cataloged and removed. Dress by dress, sweater by sweater, he folded her life into a series of large, sterile cardboard boxes. He gathered her jewelry, her cherished first editions, the photograph of them in Bali where her smile now seemed like a practiced performance. The only item he spared was a simple ceramic vase her grandmother had given them, a relic from a time when sincerity perhaps still existed. He made trip after trip to a secured, temperature-controlled storage unit he had rented under a pseudonym. With each box he carried away, the apartment grew lighter, the weight of her presence physically diminishing. The final box contained the linens from their bed. He stripped it bare, the empty mattress a stark, white island in the middle of the room. When it was done, he stood in the center of the living room. The silence was absolute. The spaces where her art had hung were pale, ghostly rectangles on the walls. The shelves were half empty. The home they had built was now just an apartment again. A beautiful, empty shell. He walked to the window, the new cold key to the smart lock heavy in his pocket. The sun was setting, casting long, deep shadows across the polished floors. He felt no triumph, only a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. He had not just packed away a woman's belongings, he had boxed up 10 years of his life, of shared jokes and whispered dreams, and labeled it all. The lie? The gilded vase was not just cracked, it had been systematically broken down to its constituent parts, and he was left alone, surrounded by the quiet, devastating truth of what it had always been. Clay and guilt, nothing more. The architect had finished his work. All that remained was for the former occupant to return and find herself permanently locked out. Sunday evening draped itself over the city in a blanket of muted twilight. Inside the apartment, the air was still and cool, scented only with the faint, clean smell of paint from the unopened cans still sitting in the barren nursery. David sat in a leather armchair, not reading, not watching the city lights begin to sparkle outside. He was simply waiting, a sentinel at the gates of his own new reality. The emotional storm had passed, leaving in its wake a landscape of serene, unshakable resolve. He was a cliff, and he was ready for the sea to crash against him one final time. Down in the street, a taxi pulled to the curb. Elena emerged. Even from this height, David could see the relaxed set of her shoulders, the slight secret smile on her face that spoke of a weekend spent in stolen, clandestine pleasure. She looked up at their window, expecting perhaps to see his welcoming silhouette. She saw only the reflective glare of the glass. He watched her approach the building's entrance, a familiar figure in an unfamiliar context. Now a guest seeking entry. The first sign of her composure cracking was a slight hesitation at the main door. Her key fob, which should have granted her immediate access, failed. She swiped it again, then a third time, more insistently. A frown creased her brow. David from his chair pressed the button on the new intercom, partially remotely unlocking the main door for her. A small courtesy and a first taste of the new order. He heard the soft ping of the elevator arriving on their floor. Her footsteps, light and quick, approached the apartment door. Then came the sound, the futile metallic scratch of a key against an unyielding digital lock. Silence. Then again, more frantic this time. Click, click, click. The sound of a ghost trying to grasp a solid object. He rose and walked to the door, his footsteps silent on the rug. He did not yank it open. He turned the handle and opened it smoothly as if he had been expecting her, which of course he had. Elena stood frozen, her key still inserted uselessly into the sleek new keypad. Her face was a canvas of confusion, rapidly shading into alarm. She looked from the unrecognizable lock to David's impassive face. "David? What is this?" she stammered, her voice losing its weekend-induced mellowness. "Why is my key not working? What's going on?" He did not step aside to let her in. He remained in the doorway, a calm, immovable barrier. "Your belongings have been moved to a secured storage facility," he stated, his voice even, devoid of the tremor she might have expected. Unit 214. The access code is the date we first met. The information landed not as an answer, but as a deeper, more terrifying question. Her mind, still clouded by the afterglow of her affair, struggled to compute the storage unit. The code? The new lock? It was a language of finality she did not want to understand. David, what are you talking about? This isn't funny. Let me in. She tried to peer past him, but his frame blocked the view. I know, Elena, he said, and in those 3 words he poured the entire crushing weight of his discovery. I know about Mark. I know your retreat was a rendezvous at the Glacier Lodge. I know everything. The use of the name, the specific location. It was a direct strike at the core of her deception. The color drained from her face, leaving her looking suddenly hollow. Her carefully constructed facade crumbled in an instant. It's not what you think, she blurted out, her voice rising in pitch. It was a mistake, a single stupid moment of weakness. He means nothing. To me? David countered, his voice sharpening for the first time, cutting through her excuses like a scalpel. It means everything. It means our 10 years were a prelude to a lie. It means the child we planned was a character in a story you were writing with someone else. It means that us no longer exists. He reached inside the door and retrieved a long, legal envelope that had been resting on the console table. He held it out to her. These are the preliminary divorce papers. My lawyer has already filed them. Your copy. Elena stared at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. She made no move to take it. Tears, real or performed, began to well in her eyes. David, please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. I'll end it, I promise. He looked at her, and in his eyes she saw no anger to manipulate, no pain to exploit, only a vast, settled certainty. There is nothing to fix, he said, his voice dropping back to a calm, devastating finality. The foundation is gone. Goodbye, Elena. For a long moment they stood there, the threshold of their home now a permanent border between their past and his future. The envelope hung in the space between them. Finally, with a trembling hand, she took it. The paper felt heavy, official, real. The truth was no longer a secret in the shadows. It was a document in her hand. Without another word, David took a single step back and closed the door. The soft, definitive thud of the reinforced lock engaging was the last sound she heard from the life she had thrown away. She was left standing in the hallway, the cold, smooth envelope in her grasp, the reality of her loss finally and irrevocably unlocking inside her. A year is a long time to mourn a ghost. For David, the months following Elena's departure were not a linear path to healing, but a slow, deliberate process of excavation. He wasn't just repairing a broken heart. He was dismantling the monument they had built together, examining each stone, and deciding what was worth keeping for a new foundation. The silence in the apartment, once so oppressive, became a canvas. He filled it with the sounds of his own rediscovery, the scratch of a pencil in a long-abandoned sketchbook, the rhythm of his breath during morning meditation, the music she had never liked. Therapy taught him to distinguish between the love he genuinely felt and the narrative of a perfect life he had been conditioned to perform. He reconnected with friends he had subtly distanced himself from during his marriage. He learned to cook for one, not as a sad necessity, but as an act of nurturing himself. The empty nursery for a time remained a sealed tomb. Then, one afternoon, he opened the door, took the unopened paint cans to a community center, and donated them. The room was no longer a symbol of a stolen future. It was just a room again, full of potential. It was in this state of quiet, unforced becoming that he met Clara. She was a landscape architect, her hands often faintly smudged with soil, her laughter as genuine as the daylight. There were no games, no performative perfection. Their connection was not a lightning strike, but the gradual, steady warmth of the sun rising. With her, David found a courage he didn't know he possessed, the courage to be vulnerable, to share his story without letting it define him. He learned that trust wasn't a single grand gesture, but 1,000 small moments of choosing to be present and honest. When Clara told him she was pregnant, the emotion that flooded David was profoundly different from the anxious excitement he had felt with Elena. This was a deep, resonant joy, untainted by fear or doubt. It was a joy built on the solid ground of mutual respect and shared values. They painted the nursery together a soft, buttery yellow. As they worked, they talked, not just about baby names and furniture, but about their hopes, their fears, the parents they wanted to be. The room was no longer a stage for a fantasy. It was being built, brushstroke by brushstroke, into a home. The day his son, Leo, was placed in his arms, David felt a completion that was entirely his own. Gazing into the tiny, trusting face, he understood that the greatest revenge was not hatred, but a happiness so authentic it made the past look like a pale imitation. Across the city, Elena's life had contracted. Her affair with Mark, a relationship born in the thrilling shadows of secrecy, withered rapidly in the harsh light of reality. Stripped of the dual identity that had fueled it, the connection revealed itself to be shallow and unsustainable. It ended not with a dramatic explosion, but with a slow, quiet fizzle of disinterest and mutual blame. The financial stability she had taken for granted vanished. The luxurious apartment, the designer wardrobe, the effortless lifestyle, all of it had been intertwined with the life she had systematically dismantled. Swallowing her pride was a bitter pill. Moving back into her old childhood bedroom, now a shrine to a youth that felt a universe away, was a humiliating defeat. The walls were covered in faded posters of bands she no longer listened to, a mocking reminder of a time when her future seemed limitless. In her loneliness, she tried to reach David. Her messages evolved over the months. First, angry accusations. You threw away 10 years over one mistake. Then, desperate pleas. I'm not the same person, please just talk to me. Finally, resigned single-word texts. Hi. They were met with a silence that was not punitive, but profound. It was the silence of a man who had simply moved on, who had closed that book and was already deep into the next volume of his life. One crisp autumn morning, David stood at his window holding a cooing Leo. The city below was bustling alive. He watched a leaf detach from a tree and spiral down in a graceful final dance. He felt no hatred for Elena, no lingering bitterness. She had become a sculptor of his past, whose harsh tools had, against her intentions, carved him into a stronger, more authentic man. Her shadow had once darkened his world, but now he stood firmly in his own light, holding his future in his arms. A future built not on the ruins of the past, but on the fertile ground he had painstakingly prepared for himself. The gilded vase was gone, and in its place was something far more valuable, simple, sturdy, and unbreakable clay. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.